Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 942 of the Juicebox Podcast. Korey Hood has type 1 diabetes. He's also a professor and health psychologist at Stanford University. And today, the creator of DiabetesWise is here to tell us more about it. While you're listening, please remember that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. If you'd like to save 10% on your first month of therapy, you can at BetterHelp.com/Juicebox. You can save 35% on your entire order at CozyEarth.com with the offer code Juicebox at checkout. And of course, AG1. Get yourself some delicious AG1 at athleticgreens.com/Juicebox. And when you use my link, you'll get 5 free travel packs and a year's supply of vitamin D with your first order. After you're finished listening to Korey, if you're interested, check out DiabetesWise.org. This episode of the Juicebox Podcast is sponsored by the Contour Next Gen blood glucose meter. Learn more and get started today at contournext.com/Juicebox. Actually, you can get more than started. You can actually buy the Contour and the strips right at that link, and they may be cheaper in cash than you're used to paying for your current meter through insurance. And the Contour Next Gen is super accurate and offers second chance testing. Today's podcast is also sponsored by Omnipod. Now, Omnipod offers the Omnipod 5 if you're looking for an algorithm, or the Omnipod DASH if you want to go old school. Either way, you're going to be tubeless and carefree with the Omnipod. Omnipod.com/Juicebox. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com to Contour, Omnipod, and all the sponsors.
Hi, I'm Korey Hood. I'm a professor at Stanford University. I'm a psychologist. I'm also a person with diabetes. I'm glad to be here and to chat with you a little bit about myself and DiabetesWise and wherever this leads.
Very nice. Well, it's nice to meet you, Korey. You type 1?
Yeah, I do. I have type 1 diabetes.
How old were you when you were diagnosed?
So I was diagnosed in 2000. So I was 26. So I'm I'm on my 23rd year. I have kind of an interesting diagnosis story, which was that I had started work on my PhD, and when I came into the PhD program, I had to pick some program, and I just happened that one of the only ones that was available was in diabetes, and so I was interested in psychology and health, but didn't really have much of an interest in diabetes, but started that work, and then within 6 months I was diagnosed myself. I had lost like 30 pounds and had all the classic symptoms. So yeah, it was an interesting experience right as you're starting that work, but
it sounds like all the circumstances of your life are pushing you in that direction.
Yeah, exactly.
What did you have your undergrad in, and what were you hoping to build on? And but you know what I mean, when you set up that PhD program, what's your goal?
Yeah, I was interested in. I think I was just interested in psychology as an undergraduate, and that was what my degree was in. It was in Bachelor of Science in Psychology, and I was interested in. I don't think I had a specific area that I was really interested in, but I was just I thought that it was fun to understand why people do the things that they do, and so to understand behavior and thoughts. And then I think as I explored it a bit more, I thought more and more about health and what is the psychology of health. And so as I started work on my PhD, which is in clinical and health psychology, it was really just what something at the intersection of health and disease, or the psychology side of it. And then as I've worked in the field, I think that my interests have also evolved into understanding, how does technology play a role in this, and how we think about health and the things that we can do, and the benefits of it, sometimes the drawbacks. And I mean, I think that's ultimately what has led us to work on DiabetesWise and other programs where we're trying to understand the intersection of how someone thinks about health and themselves and technology and devices. And obviously, diabetes is a huge part of my life, personally and professionally.
What do you find? I mean, you're diagnosed as an adult, right? So what did you find to be the most difficult in the early going, and what is sticking with you later?
Yeah, it's, I think that what was, even though I had worked in diabetes, I think you feel a little bit like this is outside of me. This is not part of me. I get to go home in the evening and, not, check blood sugars, take insulin injections, do all those kind of things. So I think that getting used to how much work it is was probably the hardest part, just thinking about it and it being on your mind all the time. And then I think as I've gone along in the 20 plus years, I think that there have been different times, but they've always been driven a little bit by devices and technology, in terms of, do I want to do this? Is it accurate enough? Am I getting burned out by using it? Everybody says this is the best thing ever. Is it really the best thing ever? And so I think it took me a little while to I don't know, maybe find my comfort place with technology and devices and all of that as we kind of moved along with the diagnosis and then just having diabetes long term.
I remember right off the bat, Arden was just diagnosed for a couple of days. And this is going back now. I mean, she was 2 when she was diagnosed. She's about to be 19, so it's 17 years ago. And I can, as clear as day, picture the nurse coming in with this little meter that she said we were going to take home with us. And then she had a cart with this giant meter from the hospital. And she's like, look, I'm going to test her for her charts here. And she tested with the big meter from the hospital. And she goes, go ahead, now you test here with this meter. And the numbers were so different than each other. And I don't mean within like 20% tolerances. I mean, like, it was shocking. And, and I said, well, I'd prefer like that meter. Why don't you let me have that one? She goes, that thing costs $10,000. You can't have that. It belongs to the hospital. You're going to use that one. I said, well, which one's right? And that was it. Like right there, it was like frozen. I thought, well, I don't understand. Like, how am I supposed to do this? If, and it is an odd thing to say that it doesn't matter. Like, I don't know how that, like, it eventually, it kind of just, I've never been able to put this into words. It just, I mean, meter technology's obviously gotten better over the years, and Arden uses a much more accurate meter. But back then, I don't know. It just, it was never an issue after I let go of it, but it was really difficult to let go of. So,
No, and I think one thing that brings up, as I was thinking about, we talked to a lot of people as we were in both the research and then as we've created DiabetesWise and other projects. But one of the things that I think a lot of people that have been diagnosed longer than maybe 10 or 15 years, they talk a lot about this kind of feeling of just flying blind, like having no idea what their glucose might be because they're getting either different readings or they're they don't have access to one. It's when I've had that, it's really kind of an unsettling experience when you're supposed to be doing something or someone tells you that you're supposed to do it in a certain way, but you don't have the actual equipment to make those decisions.
I just got done speaking with a 64-year-old woman who's had diabetes for like 50 years. And it was interesting. She tried a pump and she had some issues with the set. And so she got away from it. And even though her A1C was almost a full point lower on the pump than it was on MDI, she didn't live through a time when even the insulin and the way people thought about it and technology would allow you to make adjustments to your blood sugar after you ate or something like that. So she didn't see that as a concern. She was well aware that her A1C was lower, that she was doing better, it was healthier. She said it was a little more work, but it wasn't enough to make her think, well, I'll persevere with the pump or even check on another one. If maybe this insulin pump's not right for me, I'll try a different one. But she spoke about her Dexcom like it was just irreplaceable, because it actually fixed a problem for her that scared her whole life. She wasn't scared of a 6.7 A1C. She thought that was terrific, even though the pump was giving her a 6. But not being able to know she was low, that meant like the world to her. It was just interesting to me how she embraced one side of it, but didn't care so much about the other side until I realized that this is just the perspective she grew up through, you know. Anyway, it's interesting. So,
Yep.
So DiabetesWise is what? Where? How does it start? Who is it? What is it trying to accomplish?
Yeah. So we started DiabetesWise about 5 years ago, and what we were realizing as we looked in kind of the landscape of devices and technologies was that there wasn't really a place you could go to that had, you know, everything, all the different devices, all the different technologies. What you had to do was you had to go to one device manufacturer's website and compare it to the other device. You know, there wasn't really a place where you could do a lot of those comparisons and get at some of the things that you're talking about, which is, you know, what are some of the features that people are interested in? Some people are interested in the actual specs of how accurate one is versus the other in terms of CGM. You know, which ones have tubing, which ones don't on the pump side. And so we realized we needed to create something that could fill that void. And then we thought it was also important to do it in a way that, you know, wasn't branded or wasn't biased toward one or the other. And that's why we sought funding from the Helmsley Charitable Trust, so that we could be, you know, we certainly have a bias that devices and technologies work really well. But I don't have a bias toward which one I want you to use. I just want more people to gain access to it.
Sure.
And I think that aligned with their mission. And also, you know, obviously sitting at Stanford, you know, the idea is to promote more awareness and education just through one of the missions of the university. And so we really tried to create something that could be as untethered to device manufacturers and technologies as we could, but offer a true, you know, unbiased view of what these different technologies have to offer.
Mm-hmm. So did you do an independent study of each device to give, I mean, so basically, now I don't want to dumb this down because I'm on the website and it's obviously more than what I'm about to say, but it's an impartial review site for glucose monitors, pumps, meters, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things that, you know, I think that everybody's gotten used to this, or at least I have. I think many other people, you know, when you search for something on Amazon and it says, you know, what are other products like the one that you're, you know, looking for? And so we wanted something that was able to, you know, for example, you could compare the Dexcom G7 to the Abbott Libre 3. You could compare it to Senseonic. You could line those three up and you could say, how are these, you know, what are the features? What are the priorities? And then the part that we added, and it gets to your question about the independent work on each one, we reviewed all of them. We don't give them a value. We actually decided to stay away from us giving them a review, you know, 4 out of 5 stars or whatever it might be. But but what we wanted to do was really get to know each of those devices. And so we actually have a lot of people on our team that have diabetes themselves. We've run focus groups, you know, studies to really get at what people say. And so one of the other parts of the website includes, you know, wisdom and stories and quotes from people about what their experiences have been. And not all of them are positive. You know, we're not, we don't try and sugarcoat it. So,
no, I mean, I always say what works for you is what's best. You know, I mean, that's just sort of simple. If you abhor tubing, then you're looking at an Omnipod. If you don't care about that, then, you know, and I don't know, the inset works better for you with Tandem, then right on. If your insurance covers Medtronic, like, you know, do what works. is always been my feeling. Who pays for this, DiabetesWise? Like you said, you went to Helmsley, but is that the only funding it has?
Yeah. So right now, so we've had funding from the Helmsley Charitable Trust. So since 2018, specifically on DiabetesWise efforts, and then before that, we had study funding to do projects where, we would interview. We have one project where we interviewed 1,500 people with type 1 diabetes about the reasons why they started and stopped CGM, what makes them go off. And it's to your point a little bit earlier about the 60 something, that you talked to, we heard a lot from people that, it's for worries and concerns about hypoglycemia or for other things. And then, so we've had funding from them. So right now, all of the funding to support DiabetesWise and the HCP side of it, DiabetesWise Pro, comes from the Helmsley Charitable Trust. We sit at Stanford, and so Stanford helps us have an ability to have different computing programs and things like that. But Helmsley is the one who supports it.
So for a regular user, they can use the website for free, but there's a pro side. Is there a fee for doctors to use that?
No, both sites are free. So diabeteswise.org is for people with diabetes, but anybody can look at it. It's all free. There's no part that there is nothing that's unlocked by having a subscription or anything like that. We don't have that. And then on the pro.diabeteswise.org site, the HCP side, it has some similar features in terms of being able to compare different devices, look at a device library. But the Pro site has a prescription tool where a provider, but a person with diabetes could also do this, where they put in what their plan is, what device they're looking for, where they live, and then it'll spit out whether or not you need prior authorization to get your device, and it'll spit out who provides this, because from doing this, I think you said 17 years, you probably had 5 different DME companies or pharmacies in the last 5 weeks, so it's this kind of experience. So also trying to give people information about prior auth. Do you need it? If you do, where are you going to get it? And so we tried to make that as easy and as simple as possible to kind of simplify the prescription process.
Well, while you were explaining that, I checked to see if a Dexcom G7 was available. I mean, I know it is in New Jersey with my insurance, and it came right back with an answer. So that's
great.
Yeah, that's cool. So that's wonderful. So the goal of this website's not to make an income. You're just providing the service. Okay. Why? Now, you know what I mean? What is, I'm not saying everybody's doing something for money. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that when you sit down and say this, obviously you thought of this as a need. So I guess from your professional training, what did you think this was going to alleviate for people? What thing did you see happening that you thought that needs to be righted? The Contour Next Gen Blood Glucose Meter is very, very accurate. In fact, it may be much more accurate than the old janky busted meter that somebody just handed you in a doctor's office all those years ago. The Contour Next Gen also offers second chance test strips, which means you can hit the blood with a test strip, not get quite enough, go back and get more without ruining the accuracy of the test strip, without ruining the accuracy of the test, or wasting a strip. The Contour Next Gen is also easy to use, easy to read, got a big bright screen, and a nice light for, at night when you're doing your blood tests in the middle of the darkness. ContourNext.com/Juicebox. When you get there, you can read and learn every little thing you want to know about Contour meters, or you can click on that orange Buy Now button. And that button will lead you to a number of places where you could buy meters and strips. Rite Aid, Target, Kroger, Meijer, CVS Pharmacy, Walgreens, Amazon, and Walmart.com. The meter and the strips very well may be cheaper in cash than what you're paying now through your insurance company for another meter that very well may be not as accurate. ContourNext.com/juicebox. My daughter's been using a Contour meter for years. We absolutely love it. Arden's Contour is my favorite meter that we've ever used. I don't think you can go wrong with checking it out. Another way you cannot go wrong, in my opinion, is by getting an Omnipod. My daughter's been wearing an Omnipod every day since she was 4 years old. She's about to turn 19, and Omnipod has been a friend to us every step of the way. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Here's what you get with Omnipod. First and foremost, no tubing. Just nothing at all. You are not connected to a controller by tubing like you will be with every other meter that is currently available. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Head over and check it out. Are you looking for automation? Well, if you have the Dexcom G6 with Omnipod 5, that device can make decisions for you based on your settings and your carbs. It's fantastic. It takes insulin away if it thinks you're going to get low. It gives you more if it thinks you're going to get higher. It's all run on a little algorithm right there in that Omnipod, and it's astonishing. Omnipod.com/juicebox. If you're not looking for an algorithm, the Omnipod DASH is an absolutely fantastic option. Head over now, check it all out, do your reading, your gazintas, all that stuff. Omnipod.com/juicebox. I'm going to it right now. You're going to get there. Oh my gosh, you'll see me. Don't let that scare you. Just scroll down past that part. You're going to get a nice overview of the Omnipod 5 and options on how you can get started. You can ask for a free trial of Omnipod. Oh, take the pod for a test drive. Let's go, it says. Hit the let's go button. Get yourself a free trial. Or if you want to check your coverage, find out what your estimated copay is, that's all on the site as well. Omnipod.com/juicebox. Links in the show notes. Links at juiceboxpodcast.com. I'm going to get you back to Korey. We're going to find out more about DiabetesWise, and then you can get on with your day.
That's a great question. I think as I've thought about it, I think that the critical first part is that I think there's not enough awareness about what's available from devices and technologies. And so, if you think about someone who's diagnosed right now, they may have to do a lot of searching, a lot of information to get to increase their awareness of what's available to them. Yeah. So I think that the first part was to increase awareness of devices and technologies, that they work and that they're available. The second part was to broaden access, because we know that if in your search right there, if you would have put in a different type of insurance, or maybe you put in Medicaid or Medicare, it may have come back as not being covered. And so then many times people in those situations will just stop and they'll say, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I can't access this. So we wanted to, help people become more aware, help them gain access. And that may be, we have different kind of programs or not programs, but guides for them to seek approval, how to get, pre-certification, do all of those kind of things that are a lot of work. So, and then the last part is that to get people on technology and get them on devices, we think that will improve both quality of life and their health outcomes. And that's further down the road, things that we don't track as closely, but, we're interested in that. And I think that, your question about, the money side is a great one. I think that, the reality is you couldn't sustain this without, philanthropy. You can't, or you couldn't sustain this without some income, and you can't maintain an unbiased or unbranded view if you start taking money from device manufacturers, for companies. And so we have to find a way, our long-term program, our long-term ideas, we've got to make this sustainable in a way that we can still remain neutral, but we're going to have to generate some income to support it in some way.
Well, Korey, you should have came to me earlier, because what I do is I just say, look, you can buy ads in the podcast, but if somebody says something crappy about your thing, I'm not sticking up for you.
Yeah.
I just think it's people's experiences. It's funny. I relate to exactly what you're saying. You can have a thing that is so valuable to people, but that doesn't mean anything. You still have to make them aware of it, show them how to use it, make them understand why it's helpful for them. Like it really is. It's a difficult thing. Like I have series within this podcast. I am completely comfortable telling you, Korey, you listen to those series, your A1C is going to be a 6 with very little trouble. And I don't mean in the 6s. Yep. I mean a 6. If you apply a couple of the other ideas, you can live in the 5s with a little bit of technology. Free podcast. Like that's it. Because I take ads, because I got into the same spot you were at. I was like, I'm going to have this thing. And it turns out if you turn to people and say, hey, I could save your life for $5 a month, they'll go, no, thank you. And that's just the thing you can't get past. I tried to make the podcast for a little while without ads. And then my wife was like, you better get a job. And I was like, oh, okay. So we took some ads. And what I find is that I just stay focused on, in my mind, my job is helping people. That's all I see my job as. And I take advertising money for people so I can do that. And I also find that the honesty, which is why I like this idea, I think the honesty fixes everything, because nothing's perfect. And in fairness, I don't see any device manufacturers running around saying our thing is perfect and your thing isn't. I think it's pretty obvious once it's in your hands. Everything has limitations one way or the other, right? It's what's best for you. And I actually think from a marketing perspective, that's the best thing that the companies could say, is that you should try our thing and hopefully it's right for you. I mean, to me, that's how you sell this stuff. Like it's TiVo. You put it in their house and then they'll love it or they'll hate it and they'll keep it or they won't. And you move on to the next person. This is terrific that you're doing this. Really, it's, I guess then the next leap, right? It's probably why you're here, is how do you make people aware of it? That's absolutely so difficult. Yeah.
And I think that, I appreciate, everything that you mentioned there. And I also think, these are the things that I think we're thinking about as we try and grow this and reach. I think that one of the biggest efforts we've tried to make in the last probably 6 months is making more diabetes care professionals aware of the site, because we think there's a lot of value with the prescription tool. We think there's a lot of value with, the comparison of the different features. And I mean, you think about, we're not just thinking about the endocrinologists here, we're thinking about those in primary care, the 60 something that only gets to see primary care, never sees a diabetes specialist, but how are they going to become more aware of this? And so I think that, so some of those efforts include, reaching out to specific clinics, making them more aware, doing things like this. And then, it's a great opportunity to be on here and talk about this and just to continue to get the word out about it. But also, we're trying to exhibit we're planning at the American Diabetes Association in a couple of weeks to have a booth and to talk about it. They give nonprofits a little bit of a price discount, which is the only way that we can be there and exhibit. But it's really the idea. You're right. Making people more aware is really the first part, and then I think that as hopefully what we can do is we can increase access, because we think that there's a lot of people who can't access these or just aren't aware of them. So let's do that. And
this is the pathway to that. You're an actual researcher, but I did an informal poll. It was maybe a 50 question survey. I think I got 1,100 listeners of the podcast to respond. Okay. And I had a great person who has type 1 who was at Johns Hopkins. She was finishing up her MPH and she wanted to help the podcast. And I said, can you help me facilitate this poll. Like, make it as close to what, real researchers would
Yeah.
be impressed by. And what I learned is that overwhelmingly the people that listen to this podcast are helped by this podcast, sometimes 3 or 4 to 1 over their doctor, and like 6 to 1 over other materials online or in print. And that was a real big lesson for me. I just thought, like, wow, I knew what the podcast did for people. I see the reviews. I have a bustling like Facebook group. Like, so I hear back from people constantly. But I thought, all right, well, let's make it so that they're not, their face isn't in an avatar. Maybe if they want to say something, sideways to me, like, this will be a good place for them to do it. I couldn't get anybody to say anything different. Like, it was fascinating. And so when I think about my job, I think my job and your job are very similar. I've been doing this for 9 years. And when people ask me what I want the goal, what is the long-term goal of this? I always think I want for one day somebody goes to their doctor's office and actually gets the right information immediately. And because you can't count on your doctor, right? Like they're not with you all the time. They can't be in your pocket, but they can put you in the right direction. And I'm really sure that by trying to sometimes save people's feelings or not overload them, you can send them down the wrong path. Then they can have a bad outcome. And then they can come to believe that that outcome is their lot in life. And then they don't look up again. And then they just live like that. And they go down, I mean, you have no idea how many people come on here and talk about their 11 A1Cs for 10 years of their life. And then I said, well, what fixed it? I was in Costco one day and a lady saw my pump and told me about your podcast. And now my A1C is a 6. And I think about technology the same way. So many people, especially kind of old school type 1s, especially, their expectations aren't the same. And so when they're presented with these ideas, they're like, no, this is good enough. I'm fine. But with pumps like, I mean, I know you don't use but I mean, any of the algorithms, Omnipod 5, Control IQ, this iLet thing that's about to come out, right? I mean, I think iLet's shooting for like a 7 A1C. I'm not sure. I'm about to interview him this week, right? But so don't hold me to that right now. But if I slap a pump on someone with an 11 A1C and they can keep a 7, well, you just changed their life.
Oh, absolutely.
And so, but then again, it becomes about awareness and access and that feeling like I could do this. And that's not something you get from your doctor, who, by the way, could be in practice for 25 years and be giving you a certain pump because 20 years ago, like a pretty girl brought her bagels on Fridays and was like holding up a pump, like you don't know why you're being told what to do. And I wanted to ask you about that, because if you're willing to talk about it, when you speak to doctors, do they really know? Or are they just doing what they do too? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it does make sense, and I think that I appreciate the context to why why we think about this. I think I guess I would maybe I'll answer from both the personal and then more of like the DiabetesWise side. I think that personally, I think what I've found myself doing is gravitating toward doctors that know and that are in the know. And so I've been fortunate to be in places where there are some really great, endocrinologists or diabetologists who I can access. And so, and there've been several that, you push to the side because they're maybe not as, it's not even about being aggressive, but just being, but I guess listening to me and doing what I think might be helpful or doing that. But I think I'm in a really unique and privileged position to be able to do that because of where I've worked and people that I've gotten to know. So sure. I think that what I would love is for people to feel like that, that to have that personal connection to a provider where they can tell them things and the provider is going to have their back or they're going to do that. And I think that they're out there, but those are also the ones that have a waiting list of a year long because they know that they're really great. So I think that, so that's a little bit part of it. And then I think the other thing that it reminded me of when you were mentioning that was that on DiabetesWise, we have a section called Wisdom, and it's really these stories that people have, and some of them are quotes, some of them are videos you can watch about their experiences, and a lot of times it's about their experiences with devices. But the amount that people feel empowered when they take over some part of management, and maybe that's through a device and being able to see the numbers, make a decision about a device, when they feel empowered about it, it really changes, I think, their approach to management. And that, I think that you were talking, the example of the person that has that interaction in Costco and then goes from an 11 to a 7 A1C. I mean, it's because they've been empowered, and and your podcast empowered them. What we're hoping is with DiabetesWise that we empower them in a way. And the last thing I'll say real quick about that is that there's some really interesting research on the way that people view patients, view different kinds of providers, even though they don't always agree with them, or they still give them a lot of power, give them a lot of, I mean, there's so much reverence to the providers.
Mm-hmm.
And then, but the reality is that they listen to other people who are in the trenches or on the front line in the same way. They listen to them in a different way. And I think it's often a more powerful way.
Those two things can conflict a lot too. I've come to believe that doctors, teachers, police officers, we just believe, like, hands down. We're just like, okay, no matter what, like, I was raised to say yes, and the white coat and the doctor, and you went to more school than me, you must be smarter than I am, like all that other stuff. And then you go out into the real world and someone says, have you tried pre-bolusing? And they go, oh, my doctor says not to do that. And then there are some people whose personalities allow them to just break free of that and try. But overwhelmingly, a lot of people are rule followers. And so they'll spend, this breaks my heart most specifically. They'll spend their time knowing that what they're doing is wrong, believing there's a better way, and not being able to act on it. And I think that psychological punishment is maybe one of the sadder things I've seen in diabetes. Like, to get up every day, to be scared to eat, to be scared to use your insulin, to know there's something you should be doing. Not only do you know that there has to be something else here, but I was just talking to somebody and they're doing it, and then they can't take that step. I mean, I hope you're putting a lot of effort into getting this to doctors, like, specifically. Obviously, there are plenty of doctors that know what they're doing. We're not talking. I mean, if they all did, then we wouldn't be talking about it. But, and I'm not even coming down on the ones who don't. I mean, honestly, like, my daughter just crossed out of pediatric into adult endocrinology, and we were very lucky. You said the same thing. We were lucky that, I mean, we were able to find a head and shoulders above the rest physician, who, by the way, doesn't do type 1 anymore, but is doing it for Arden, my mom's still alive, man, because my neighbor's kid grew up to be a doctor who knew another doctor who set us up with an oncologist. When other people were saying, no, your mom's too old, we'll let nature take its course. And that guy was like, yo, you want me to help her? I'll help her. And that's privilege right there, just by knowing people. I think that most people are not going to come into that situation. So it is your job, to circle back around. Like, I don't ever think I finished my thought completely. I see my job as telling enough people in the moment how to help themselves, so that then they go to their doctors, and inevitably the doctor is going to say, how did you do this? And they will say, I listened to the Juicebox podcast. And then I've had doctors come on. There's an endo that came on this show a couple of years ago, and she said the podcast fundamentally changed how she helped people. And so, like, I think that's it. Like, I think, like, when I lay down and die, I'd like to think that I changed how doctors talk to people about their diabetes on some level, like, somewhere. And this is how these things happen. Very, very small steps.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with you. And I think that I mean, both on the idea of the impact, but your point exactly ties into what we thought about what Diabetes Wise was, that the only way that there's an authenticity to it, or is if you hear from other people with diabetes. It's not. I think that we can listen to a lot of different providers, and there's great providers, like you said, and I think the ones who aren't as aware, it's usually because they don't have the time to it, and they're seeing 40 patients in a day, and then it's trying to figure out a time to, like, learn something new. It's really tricky.
Yeah.
So I think on Diabetes Wise, we wanted within the wisdom section to insert that, but we also added, to your point about, kind of the guides, and giving some people it is advice. I mean, we're not reserved about offering advice. But we offer guides for how to talk to your provider about getting on a device. Here are some things that you can say that are going to be helpful. Here are some phrases you might want to use. This is the time to do it. You may even want to send a message through the patient portal before you go, because I want to talk about getting on a pump. I want to talk about starting on CGM. And then, excuse me, and then also on the provider side, on the we really think about what are some better ways to listen to what the person with diabetes is coming to you about. What are some, and if you want to prescribe, here's ways to do it. And if you get that first denial, don't give up. We've got to keep pushing through on these ways.
I find it's helpful to give people expectations. So there's another thing I think that I'm doing here is somehow, by the way, before Ted Lasso was popular, I saw part of my job as just like, I'm like the coach, like as you're running out on the field, it's a slap on the ass. I'm like, you can do it, get out there. Like there's part of that. There's also part about, I bucked the system years ago, and you've been around a long time, Korey, so you're going to know what I'm talking about. But there was an edict in the diabetes community, people who created content, that you didn't celebrate because it made people feel bad. And I don't think you should be running around in the end zone like spiking the ball and flipping people off in the stands. But what I do think is there's a mistake that if you think of people as being above you, they're not above you, they're ahead of you. Like it's not a score, it's a path. And so why would we not illuminate the people up ahead who have already traversed all the problems, know the answers, are having the success that you're hoping for? Why don't we shine a light on them as hope? So to me, you give people expectation that they deserve better and hope that they can achieve more. And then you show them, look, here's how I did it. That's all I'm doing here. I just share what worked for my daughter, and you can cherry pick from it or copy it exactly or ignore me. I don't care. I'm just doing my best to put it out there. And I do think that was the other thing that this space missed for a while, was that a lot of the content was coming from people who were struggling, which then makes it feel like that's the whole world. And then the people who figured it out, they kind of go away and go back to their life. And I said to my wife one time, I'm going to stay behind and try to be a beacon, and that takes a little bit of, I don't know what that takes. I was going to say chutzpah, but I don't know if people know that word. But what I did was I looked at my daughter and I said, I have a system. I don't call it something. I haven't marketed it to anything. I didn't name it all. But I know if you do these things, your A1C is in the fives. It just is. I know it. I'm going to stay behind and tell stories about it. Where I'm at maybe, and I know I'm just going to translate right into this thing. I'm worried for you. You've got this wonderful website. But the one thing I've learned being around this for so long, again, going back to the beginning, is having good information doesn't make you definitely successful and help you reach people. The reason the podcast works is because there's great information mixed in with stories about people being diagnosed on a heroin bender. And so that's the actual story on the podcast. Or people coming on and being so emotional and honest about themselves. And really, it's the long form that allows it to happen. And then I mean, not for nothing, I just got here first. So my camp's been set up longer. And so that's where the numbers, I mean, I don't know what you think about all day, but most of the day I think about helping more people. Like, how do you reach more people? And I mean, I'm happy to have you on here and help about this, because this is just a wonderful idea. And I know how hard it is to put it in front of people.
Yeah. And I think that there are a couple of things that I thought about as you were mentioning that. One is that, simply giving people education and information. I mean, we've known that forever, but we still do it, which is, it doesn't change outcomes often. What we try to do with DiabetesWise, and I'm thinking about a specific story of a guy on there named Dan who talked a lot about his journey in diabetes of, trying some different devices and then going off them, and then, how it made him, feel at different times, how it made him frustrated, angry, and then to come back, have to give it a couple of years and then come back to it. But then ultimately what it unlocked for him was the ability to do some of the things that he really loves doing. And in his specific example was motorcycles, and like being able to do things as a group with other friends that he wasn't able to do before he had CGM, because he was so worried about going low and things like that. And so I think that the part that helps a lot, and I think that you do this in the podcasts, and then what we try and do on DiabetesWise as well, is to walk people through the process too, of when they run up against those barriers or those challenges, what do you try and do? And then give examples of people who have problem solved, who figured it out. And those are the ones that, like you said, are kind of out in the front leading. And I can do that a little bit, but if you hear that from, if you listen to stories of, 10 other people who did it in the same way, or you on the pro side, if you talk to, you listen to some of the providers who have struggled over time giving prescriptions, but have found a way to do it. I think that's a much more powerful story than anything you're going to get in a relatively short visit with your provider.
Yeah. And bullet points they're useless. Like I've said before, like there could be the secret to life in this episode. If it's not entertaining, you're not going to get to it. If the sound is bad, Korey, people will shut it off. Like there are so many like little speed bumps that derail people. And I understand why, but it's just, it's so dry. And you mentioned it earlier. It's already your whole life, right? Like you're living with it constantly. Like, well, I'm going to spend my entertainment hours listening about diabetes. Like, you're out of your mind. You know what I mean? But that's why when I first started doing this, I had someone come up to me and say, you can't do what you're doing. They said, you can't tell people how you manage your daughter. It's dangerous. And I said, I disagree. And I think back on that person all the time. And I wonder what would have happened if I would have just like let them scare me off, and I said, no, I don't agree with you. I said, I reject honestly the idea that all of everyone's diabetes is that different. Your variables are different and your personal life is different, etc. But insulin works the way it works. Hydration works the way it works. Those things are consistent. And it's sort of, to me, like, I'm so old now, but it's the Matrix, right? like I know when you stop and look at it in the beginning, it looks like a guy in a black coat, but it turns out it's ones and zeros, and you can manipulate it. Is it hard? Not after you understand it. It's never going to be easy. You get better at it. There's a path through that. And you have to, someone's got to give you, I'm going to ruin my own metaphor because I forget which pill showed you the Matrix, but, but someone's got to give you that pill and say, look, there's more here than what you're seeing. I hate when people say that's just diabetes, because to me, that means you just don't understand how insulin works. Like you wouldn't say that. Like, diabetes isn't a thing that happens to you. It's a thing that happens that you more frequently don't understand, and understanding it gets you a lot farther, and understanding the technology is going to take people a lot farther. I mean, this is really wonderful. I appreciate you doing this.
And
Yeah.
one thing I would add to that, I completely agree with that idea, and I think that what also happens, I think, with devices and technologies, which makes DiabetesWise unique, is that given our my experiences of personal diabetes, but also as a psychologist, and then a lot of people on our team having diabetes, I think that we better understand the psychological connection to devices and technologies, because there's a big one. And at the core of it is this relatively straightforward, like you said in the Matrix, ones and zeros. I mean, there's a relatively straightforward approach to it. But then you add in all of these emotions to it. You add in all of this extra junk that you bring to it, or that others bring to it, and it makes it really complicated. And so I think that trying to get through a bit of that with some of the tools that we have on the sites, I think can help people get through a little bit of that junk and that baggage. Because if you can make it a bit clearer, you can manage it in a lot better way.
Nah, 1,000,000%. It's listen, Korey, you were older when you were diagnosed, but I sent my daughter off as a freshman this year. She went 700 miles by car from my house.
Oh, wow.
Lived by herself. And she kept her A1C in the low sixes, mid sixes, by herself, eating crappy food.
Yeah, that's great.
Her first time away. And her A1C went up like a half a point from when she left. And I was like, you're doing terrific. And what does she have? She's got a CGM. She has a pump. She's using an algorithm. Those things are great. I see plenty of people use those that don't have A1Cs like that. Like people don't know, the food at colleges is horrendous, and a lot of empty calories and fried food, and bolusing for it is a Herculean effort. But what she really has is like the things, the ideas that we talked about over years and went over, and that when something comes up, she doesn't pause and go, I don't know what to do. She goes, oh, this is this thing. I do this. You know what I mean? Like, she's got knowledge, and it's available to her without having to wonder. And I just think that that's incredibly important. And I think that doctors need that. Like, when I walk into an office and I say, hey, do you have a suggestion for an insulin pump? I don't want to hear about the one that, you like because the company's up the street from here, which happens in the Midwest a lot, and I don't want to hear which CGM, like the commercial you saw. Like, I saw the commercials too. Like, what do you know about them? And if you don't know, learn and learn by talking to people, not by reading a pamphlet or looking for bullet points. Go find people listen to them, and you have your patients right there. Listen to them and then figure it out yourself. It's not, do you think the model is, I don't know if I'm going to take you in an uncomfortable way. I often think that the model of one patient going to one doctor for a prescribed amount of time around diabetes is completely wrong. I think that every day 300 people ought to come into an auditorium, and all the endocrinologists and the practitioners stand up front, and they should just talk to everybody. Enough people will ask questions that everyone's questions will get answered. And I don't know. I see it. I see that being, I know there's HIPAA and stuff like that, but you could sign.
Well, but I think that I think that you bring up right there at the end, one of the biggest barriers to that is, all of the kind of regulatory things that make it hard. And there is a conflict between helping people and all of the kind of roadblocks that we put up from a regulatory standpoint. And I think that's partially why you've seen people move to some of the things like DiabetesWise and I mean, your podcast, other sources where you can get more of a frank, view, a more authentic view. And I think that there's a lot of value in that. I do think that, I mean, I would love to be able to do more group visits and have people together. And, it's something that they've been trying to do for 2 decades. And it's been really tricky to get enough people to want to do these group visits because of some of those kind of things with privacy and confidentiality and all of that. But the other thing that I think, and this is where I actually thought that you were going with it, was thinking about, providing care, more remotely and more broadly, and people not having to come into clinics, people not having to come into places. And I think we're moving in the direction where you're going to have maybe a little bit more of an option to do things remotely and to have a little bit more of a menu of who you might want to see.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, then we need to help people become more informed about making those decisions and choices. And I think that, we try and do that at DiabetesWise. And, I think that we want people to feel empowered, feel like they can make these choices and decisions on their own, but they need the information, they need the nudge, they need other people's stories to support their pushes to do this.
You're making me think I should get back to something I was doing. I did during COVID a lot. We did these like Zooms, and if I'm being honest, it came out of I was trying to prove something at first. I saw a very big diabetes organization do an online Zoom, and 14 people were in it. And I thought, oh, is it hard to get people in these things? So then I did one and had 200. I got like 250 people in it, and I was like, all right, that made me feel better. But then I got in there and I was like, what is this supposed to be? What's it going to do? What we turned it into was, I will sit here as long as I can and answer as many questions as you can while everybody listens. But what I have that no one else has is that I get to say at the beginning that nothing you hear on the Juicebox podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. And I'm not telling you what to do. I'm giving you my opinion of your question. And I don't know how long it's going to have to be before people in a position of power look up and see that they're being supplanted by a guy in an extra room in his house. You know what I mean? Like, and I'm reaching more people, and that's where it has to change, really. Like you have to give up that idea of the model, which is like, I'm smarter, I went to school, I know, even though any doctor you talk to will tell you that they like studied diabetes for 18 seconds while they were in med school. Right. And, so, but then they get out there with that idea of like, this is how it works. It doesn't work like that anymore. My podcast last week was in the top 10 on the US medicine list with shows that are run by Fortune 500 companies that have staffs of hundreds of people. And if that doesn't tell you that these people need accessible information that they can walk away and use actionably, and they don't want to come to your office, and they don't trust you, and where you're not doing it the way that you should be, if that's not clear at this point, then like I don't know how much clearer to make it. Do you know that we don't just help people here with diabetes? We've taught people how to advocate for themselves with their iron issues, their thyroid issues, their mental health. We branched out, in a world where people told me, don't mix diabetes together. Nah, we help people with type 2 diabetes. It's not all those old models are supposition that doesn't work in the real world anymore. Like this is how people get information now. Like, get on board or get left behind. And don't, by the way, and I'm not calling anybody out, although I am thinking of somebody. Don't get it in your head to start a podcast and then make it the same boring stuff that they hear in the office. The delivery system's not the problem. The message is the problem. So anyway, I don't know how I got that.
I think I really appreciate all those comments. And I would also say, I think it also ties a little bit back into what you said early on was, thinking about what the value proposition is for people, and thinking specifically about DiabetesWise, I think that, they have to feel like there's some value in it, that they're hearing some advice or some suggestions, but it's also relevant to their life and the daily grind of diabetes. And I think that, you can speak to that, and the experience that people have to have, whether we're talking about people with diabetes or the healthcare professionals, they have to view it as something that's valuable and something that's going to move it along. And I think that, even we make the sites free and we make them, accessible to everything. But that's not value. Value is them feeling like, I learned something new, I'm going to apply it to my life. This is how the other person did it. these are technologies that can move me along in my
Yeah.
journey with diabetes. And I think that that's what we're trying. Well, that's what we're trying to do, and hopefully we're achieving, and we can keep moving it along with DiabetesWise.
Well, bravo. Thank you. I appreciate you doing it. I have other questions that don't have anything to do with this, but I don't want to muddle the conversation up. So maybe I'll just ask you if we haven't talked about anything that we should have before I let you go.
No, I really appreciate this time, and I also think a couple reflecting back on our conversation. I think that I want to just emphasize that DiabetesWise is free. That we have a bias toward getting people on devices, but we don't care which ones they are. It's got to, like you said, it's got to fit your life. It's got to be the best one for you. And I think that we have some features and some tools on it that help you figure out what that is. What is going to be the best fit for your life? And so, I should, also note, we've great relationship with the Helmsley Trust, and we really support them from both the funding, but also just they're allowing us to do the things that we want to do with this and make it accessible to people. So
David's been on the show.
I listened. I went back and listened to his, and I realized you're probably approaching 1,000 episodes soon, right?
Yeah,
sometime this year or next year. You'll
please,
hit 1,000.
You're delightful. In a couple of months, in
a couple months. Okay.
So Korey, the same thing is when I was imagining all of this. I used to keep this stuff private, but I guess nobody's going to try to do it. So I guess I can just say what I'm doing. Most podcasts come out once a week. Some come out once a month. There are people, I know a person who tells me that their podcast is in its 9th season, but it has, 80 episodes. I put out 80 episodes in 2 months because for me, it's content and it's keeping you here, right? Because I don't know how to put this, but social media, if people don't understand, social media is like trying to keep a rock hot with a match. As long as you hold the match on it, the rock is hot. The minute you take the match away, the rock is cool. And before you know it, someone else will come along and heat up a different rock. And that's it. So it has to be informative. It has to be accessible. You have to meet people where they are. It has to be entertaining. It has to be valuable. And it has to be plentiful. I can't just put out an episode once a week and hope everyone remembers to come back. You know what I mean? Because in the last 7 days, Netflix put out 3 different shows. Right. Joe Rogan had somebody on that everybody wanted to hear about, and they're all yelling and screaming. There's too much going on. So I don't think of this as a podcast as much as I think of it as a community. And it's a community of people who you don't meet. But and I have to thank one of the people who was on the show a couple of years ago. She's a young girl in her mid to late 20s. And, she told me she was coming on to tell me how much the podcast helped her. And we had a long conversation. I think 45 minutes into it, I said, how did the podcast help you? I was literally sitting back getting ready for my kudos about how I taught her how to bolus or something like that. She goes, no, I knew all that before. And I said, oh, I don't understand how the podcast helped you then. She goes, I don't either. But when I listen, I want to do better. And that was it. And when she said that, I thought, well, then I can't just put up 1 episode this week, because what if that's not for her? I'm going to put up 4. She'll want one of them. You know what I mean? One of them will meet her need this week. And that's how I think of it now. I want you to have a ton of options, just like with these devices. And maybe you're not going to want 3 of them, but you'll want 1. And that'll keep you here listening to other people's stories. And, 35 minutes into a story, you might hear oh, is that how you bolus for pizza? I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. Or what's a fat rise? How fascinating it is it, Korey? How many people are using insulin to control their diabetes? And not one doctor has ever told you that fat slows down your digestion and that's why you spike later. No one ever says that. You know what they say? You should see a nutritionist. Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'll help me. Thanks a lot. So give me something I can work with here. Anyway, you get me all upset now, Korey. I
right as we're wrapping up.
I go on and on. I'm I don't know. It just all seems like common sense. And I have to say something. It's an aesthetic decision on your website. I don't know who made the decision, but using sort of just line drawings of devices as your graphics instead of images it's nice because it really doesn't feel like a marketing tool, and it's clearly not. But I mean, it could get shiny if you started using the images. It's a nice small decision. Aesthetically, it's wonderful.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and I'll just call out the Sarah Krugman and the team at HealthMade, which was a design company in San Francisco that we worked with closely on this. And Sarah's type 1 diabetes, and we found surrounding ourselves with a lot of people with diabetes has helped. A lot of really smart people, has helped us figure out some of these things. So that was her decision.
That's wonderful. You tell Sarah if she ever wants to make some free graphics for a podcast. I know somebody would take her up on it. Korey, thanks very much, man. I want to thank Korey for coming on the show and remind you that you can check out DiabetesWise at DiabetesWise.org. And let's thank Omnipod and the Contour Next Gen blood glucose meter for sponsoring this episode of the podcast. Omnipod.com/Juicebox. Get that free test drive or learn more about Omnipod 5 and Omnipod DASH. And of course, ContourNext.com/Juicebox. Read up about our meter, get one for yourself, buy it right there online. The whole shebang. It's a great website. They're both great websites. They explain everything. Using my links helps support the show. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. If you're looking for community around your diabetes, check out Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes on Facebook. And that group is for everybody. I know what the title says, but if you're type 1, you're type 2, you're welcome. I don't care how you eat. I don't care anything about what you do. Your business is your business. Come on in, check out the group, watch some of the conversations, jump in and get involved, or just sit back and try to learn from others. Juicebox Podcast, Type 1 Diabetes. There's something in there for everyone.